means go. Okay. So, Uncle Jerry asked me to make a video of making the sourdough bread. What Uncle Jerry wants, Uncle Jerry gets. So, sourdough. The starting point of sourdough, obviously, is the sourdough starter, which we have here. I do love that smell. And if you can get a little close up, my camera lady, or at least a look. So, sourdough starter. I think mine might be a little bit wet, but that's all right. So, sourdough starter. You can either make your own, grow your own at home with flour and water. It takes about a week. Bit of a pain, but the result is your own personal sourdough starter, which is cool. But apparently, if you're in America, you can just go to King Arthur Flour and they'll send you some sourdough starter that you can start with and start making your own from that. So that's cool. Yeah, right? So I have done this I don't know how many times. I still don't know the recipe off the top of my head, so I'm going to be looking at my phone for that. So step one, I do everything by weight, not by volume, because it's just easier. So first thing we do is we put 250 grams of flour, not sourdough starter, into my bowl. So I purchased for myself a 16 kilogram bag of flour. And when I finished that, which believe it or not I did, I bought another one. For you Americans, 16 kilograms is 35 pounds. Yes, it is bigger than most toddlers. So, we're working on 250 grams. Takes a little while to get there. We'll cut some of this out if it gets really boring.
Adult beverage break.
And my camera woman needs an adult beverage, which is only appropriate. We should all be having adult beverages. It is a Friday evening after all. So, that's the flour. We're not done with that because we're going to need that when we need this a little bit later. Next step is 150 grams of sourdough starter. So we'll zero out my scale and pour in 150 grams. So now, I usually keep my sourdough starter in the fridge between breads. So you want to give it time to warm up before you actually cook with it. So it's nice and alive and active and fresh. So 150 grams of this. Give or take. There's probably better ways of doing this, but I like to just pour. Does the job. And we are at 150. This part gets a little bit messy potentially, but that's all right. Did my camera woman want to say something?
Well, I was going to say there's a bit of a process before this bit with regards to the starter. What did you have to do earlier in the day with the starter?
No. Today all I had to do was take it out of the fridge and let it warm up so that it was still active.
Okay.
Basically, the cold puts the yeast that is naturally occurring in the sourdough starter into nearly hibernation. So I did pour off a little bit of alcohol that had built up because it hasn't been fed in about a week. So it needs to be fed fairly regularly. So I'll feed it right after we do this. But yeah, after that, it's just make sure it's warm enough so that it's still active.
Cool.
So 150 grams. Next thing we do is we add a teaspoon of brown sugar. Which you guys can't see, but the cat got very excited because he thinks it is cheese. And the other cat got very excited because he saw his brother get excited. Oh, you poor boys. And now we add ourselves a teaspoon of salt. And final ingredient is, so I think that my sourdough breads, my doughs have been a little bit too wet recently. So ordinarily at this stage I'd be adding 125 milliliters of water. I'm just going to add 100 milliliters of water. By the way, useful trick if you've got a scale. Water weighs 1 gram per milliliter. So if you need 100 milliliters, just measure out 100 grams by weight, which is what I did. Yeah, I find that very useful. Like I said, I do everything by mass. So that is everything that goes in, nice and simple. Looks kind of like that. Woo! Right? Not very interesting. So, next thing we do is the part that has gotten so much easier. So, we picked up a couple months back this standing mixer, which has a dough hook. So, with the dough hook, which we attach on there, slide that in, turn and lock. So, the dough hook does so much of the work. It is great. I still like to knead a little bit after I've done this, but really you don't generally want to. Of course, normally have it facing the right direction so I can see what the dial is. So now we're just sort of mixing. This part's going to be really boring to watch. Seriously, it's just mixing. Right, good point. It is time for an adult beverage. I'm drinking whiskey and ginger ale made with White McCabe blended Scotch whiskey. I went to a whiskey tasting a long time ago, more than 10 years ago, and the guy said basically if you want a relatively inexpensive but very tasty blended Scotch to drink, that's the one to go with. And it has not let me down. Wow, this has mixed up quite well already. So we're going to turn it down a little bit so we don't just go, so it doesn't go too nuts. So, if, no, alright, I think I didn't put in enough water for it this time around. Looks like it should be a little bit lighter. Alright, fair enough.
Add that 25 mil back in.
Maybe 10. And this is how you do it by weight. 6, 13, 11, whatever.
Very precise chefs here.
We're very exact.
Whatever, it tastes good.
That's the goal anyway. So, went the wrong direction. So if you twist this the wrong way, it just sort of, kind of like a blender where it just goes super fast. Don't want to do that. Do it at a nice slow mix, mixing speed. Mix everything in, kneads the dough a little bit, sort of adds the stretch and the gluten and stuff. That's what that looks like. Through our dirty cover.
Flowery.
Yes, that flowery cover.
You do clean this.
Yes, absolutely.
Oh, cool.
So there it's doing its thing. That's probably good enough. So we'll stop there.
Reverse.
Not on that thing. Never hit reverse on that thing. So, next stage, which I'll need to do a bit more of than usual, I suppose, is we knead the dough.
Here, let me get this out of your way.
You're fine, my lovely assistant. So, toss a little bit of dough on here.
Flour.
I haven't even had a drink in my drink yet.
Haven't had a drink of your drink.
All right, and I'm still saying stuff like that. All right, so bring this over. Where's the twist? Having everything backwards is difficult. There we go. Dough comes out. Now we knead. So if you do it without a mixer, you knead for about 10 minutes. So we're not going to video that whole thing. This dough definitely is going to need a fair amount. Feels very hard. And wet.
Feels wet?
Yeah.
Mm.
Funny. So anyway, get to kneading.
So sorry, how long did you say it was going to need to knead after you use
So,
the blender thing?
Usually after I use the standing mixer, I only knead for a couple minutes because it pretty much does the job. Because the whole point of kneading is to stretch the dough and get the gluten in there. That sort of holds it together and lets it rise, etc., etc. This might take a little bit longer because the dough feels a bit hard and a bit wet, but we'll see. Seems to be a bit better now. But the goal of the kneading, you knead rather until you can stretch the dough without tearing it and make it so you can see through it. It's called the window pane effect. it's sort of, you can stretch it very thin without it tearing. Which I've never seen it tear, so I don't really know like what that's all about.
You know the theory of it.
Right? Like every time I've stretched my dough, it's been perfectly happy to be stretched and thin. So, I don't know. I don't know if there's
Sexy.
Right? I don't know if there's something I'm misunderstanding about that process or what. But it all seems to go fine. By the way, yes, I did wash my hands before starting.
I should hope so. Good.
This is more for the benefit of the audience. You saw me wash my hands while you were cleaning the kitchen so this would look prettier.
Yes.
All right, let's see how we're doing, because I don't want to do this for 10 minutes.
Yeah, let's see this window pane effect.
All right. Maybe this will be the time when I find out when it doesn't work.
Ooh. Sorry, somebody hissing.
Yeah. Cats fighting, that's unusual. Nope, it's definitely not ready. It tore.
Oh,
There you go.
was that a first?
Yeah, I've never seen that before. I guess I've
Well, you've only been kneading for about 2 minutes.
got it. Well, like I said, usually with the mixer you don't need it to go that long, but it makes life easier. Not really a huge fan of kneading. I know some people love to do this to get out their aggression. I guess I'm just not that aggressive. One of my coworkers used to make bread all the time, and she loved kneading just because she, could get out all her frustrations.
Yeah, I know. Well.
She was married to an Italian, but she was the one who was, the good cook and the one who was interested in food. Any Italian stereotype you brought up about her husband did not fit. He didn't drink, didn't really care that much about food.
It is bizarre. Was he like proper Italian or like...
No, Italian from Italy. The real deal.
What?
Yeah.
And no appreciation for food or wine.
Right?
I don't think Italy would claim him back.
Yeah. You might cut out some of this kneading. This is not the most interesting part.
Adult beverage time.
Also, I don't really know if I'm eating correctly. I've never bothered watching videos or...
Hey man, your bread turns out beautifully and it tastes delicious, so I think you do well.
There's that. And I do get the window pane effect usually, so I guess that counts for something.
I think so. Boop, boop.
This is the most energy-intensive part of the process. After this, we let the dough sit for a couple hours. Then I let it sit for overnight in the fridge. And then in the morning I finally cook it.
Hey, baby.
Kitty interlude.
I know. I caught him about to chase his brother.
Alright, let's see. I'm gonna...
He's like little devil cat with the lights going into his eyes. Alright, let's see this window pane.
See if we can get it. See if it's ready. Stretching.
Nice.
Nope, not ready.
Wow. Okay. It looked like it was fine until you... What that?
I mean, it might...
A little bit too far.
It might be harder to tell with this light shining in my eyes.
Oh, fair point.
Didn't seem like it quite got there to me.
Well, hopefully this video will turn out all right. I do have shaky hands, so apologies if this video is like shaky cam central.
Yeah, it just makes it feel more authentic, more of a horror movie.
Bread! Gluten!
The Bread Witch Project.
Title of your video.
The Witch Bread Project.
Sourdough, honey, sourdough.
That's the one. All right, let's try again.
Close
Normally, when I'm doing this, there's a bit of daylight. Though, granted, I've only been doing this since spring.
Yeah, like 7 months.
So, not even. So, generally, when I have been doing it, I've been able to hold up to the window and see, there's the sun.
Here, hold it up to my light.
That's what I was trying to do before. Problem is, your light
Covering
is
your face.
blinding me slightly. Yeah, it's not an accident.
She blinded
There you go.
me with science.
Can you tell? Can you see through it?
No, can't.
Okay.
I thought I could for a second.
All right. Well, anyway, you probably can't see, but right about there, it's very thin, very window paney. You can sort of see through it.
Huh. Maybe
See
because
my
I am
finger
too close. Because before, when I was standing back here, I thought that I could see through it before you kept tearing it. But okay, cool. If you could see it.
Yep. So anyway, so I can see through it. So that's the
Thank
important
you.
part.
Yep.
So what do I do next? I was ready to prepare this part. Okay. So now we get a bowl.
So when did you start doing this? April then? Not March?
April or May, yeah.
I thought it was quite early on, but...
It wasn't at the very beginning, because I know a lot of people were already doing, it was already the stereotype of...
COVID, home activities.
So now what we're doing, we're taking a bowl, we're spraying it, we're oiling it, greasing it up. Supposed to use a flavorless oil. I'm using
Fry.
sunflower oil, because whatever.
The equivalent of fry in America.
Ham in America.
Oh, pan, that's right.
So now we spread it on.
Cat back.
And we pop it in there. And then,
Cat.
which one is this?
Hello. I
Oh,
know.
yeah,
Mommy's busy.
So now we take a tea towel or a kitchen towel. I'm using a thing.
That came with our bread proofer.
Yep, yeah, with a bread proofer.
So it's an official bread proofing
Thing.
dish. I don't
So-
know. It looks like a bonnet.
Yeah. So we are making this wet, and we're going to cover this with a damp thing. So yeah, if you don't have the official bread proofing thing that has this whatever below, you can just use a kitchen towel, like whatever hand towel thing, get it wet, cover it over it, and then you let that sit for 2.5 to 3 hours, and then we'll come back to that in a little bit.
Does that sit out or does that...
This sits out.
This sits out.
This
Okay.
always sits out.
Okay. What?
This is only 2.5 to 3 hours. Then
Okay.
we pop it out of that, we knead it, and then we put it in the proper proofer in the fridge overnight.
Cool.
Because
Okay.
apparently, the longer you let it proof, the better it's going to taste.
Okay. Until we meet again.
Okay, so now that we've prepared the dough to start with, we also need to feed our sourdough. So I am going to feed it. Actually, I'm not going to feed it directly into that. That would be silly. So I'm going to feed it 100 grams of flour and 100 grams of water. And this just means that it allows the yeast to stay alive so that I can keep doing this and eating the results. Seems a bit dark when you put it that way, but...
Call ourselves pescatarians.
I mean, is yeast really anything to worry too much about? So that's 100 grams of flour, which is not going to come out of there very easily. I haven't yet come up with a really good, easy way to feed my sourdough starter, so I'm happy to take suggestions in comments or whatever.
Have you tried funneling? You've got that funnel.
Yeah, that's a liquid funnel. That's not going to do the job.
Yeah, just lost a bit.
Yeah, lost a little bit.
That's how we get flour all over the place.
Well, that and flour just goes all over the place. That's just the nature of flour. Alright, so that is 100 grams of flour. And now, we need 100 grams of water. There's probably some scientific reason why you want like a 1-to-1 ratio. I don't know.
Bread is on the table.
Yep. I just go for the 1-to-1 ratio because that was what the instructions were when I was first making my sourdough, first getting my starter going.
Well, it's worked well.
Indeed. So, here we go. So, do that now. Mix it all up with a fork.
Why a fork?
Because nothing else is going to mix it right.
A spoon?
Nope. Because the flour is just going to get bunched up if you just use a spoon. With a fork, the liquid and flour will go through the tines, and that'll help break it up. Because you need the flour to be and water to be exposed to the yeast inside. The consistency,
science and gastronomy of baking bread.
From what I've read, the consistency of your sourdough starter right after it's been fed should be pretty similar to creamy peanut butter. Mine's always a little bit wetter than that, but creamy peanut butter just doesn't seem right. I like crunchy. And so, one of the cool things is, if you have your own sourdough, you'll have to have it in a glass jar, kind of like this one, and you don't want to ever seal the jar. So, I just rest the glass on top, and it will allow gases to escape as they produce gases. But if you've got a nice clean jar, which this one is not, I'm afraid, but if you've got a clean jar, over the next few hours, you would actually see the level of the sourdough go from here all the way up, sometimes all the way up into the top. I've had overflow a couple of times.
Yes.
Which isn't great. But it's really cool because you get to watch it sort of grow and then recede. So now I've done this. I've fed it. I'm going to pop it in the fridge so that it will slowly feed over the next week.
Okay, you don't leave it out while it's feeding?
No, because then it's going to go in the fridge hungry and you don't want that.
Oh.
You want it eating for the next week slowly rather than eating really quickly now and then napping with no food.
Okay, cool. Excellent. Video size limit nearly reached, so I'm going to stop now.
So here we are, 2.5 hours later, and our bread, our dough, shouldn't have risen very much, and indeed it hasn't. It's okay. So now, add some more flour, turn out the dough, and now we've got another one of those instructions that I don't really know what it means, so I just sort of fake it. Okay. Sometimes you gotta help the dough come out. So now we're supposed to, quote unquote, knock back the dough. So generally speaking, I just knead it a couple of times. Because I don't really know what the hell that means. Now we shape the dough into a ball. Which, not as straightforward as you would think. I kind of want it to be as smooth as possible so that the bread comes out relatively smooth. There's always going to be a little bit of a seam. That's okay. Now, we pop it into this guy. There's a real word for that. I just can't remember what it is.
Wasn't that the proofing bowl?
Well, we use it for the proofing, but I think it's called a banneton or something like that. Banneton basket. So, lots of flour in here. So you need to put lots of flour in here because otherwise the dough will get stuck and won't come out nicely when you try and take it out to cook with it. And sort of like a cast iron skillet, we're sort of seasoning it with flour every time we do this. So now we put our dough seam side up, so there's a little bit of shape, we call that a seam, seam side up into the bowl. Cover it with some flour. Et voila. And now we will cover it with plastic wrap, which has been sprayed with oil. again, we whip out our trusty spray. Spritz it. Spritz it. Voila. And now you can either leave it for about 4 hours to rise. It's about 9:30, so we're not going to do that. So instead, we're just going to pop it in the fridge overnight. And in the morning, we will make our bread. We'll actually do the cooking. So, that's it for now. Good night. We'll be with you in the morning. Cool. So, tomorrow morning, we go to the fridge and we get our bread, which has hopefully risen overnight. Let's see. You see that? It's risen a bit.
Bit.
Yeah. You know, it's a small dough. It's a small recipe. So now we're just going to let it sit out for a little while to come back up to room temperature so that the yeast is, again, active. So when we toss it in the oven, it will actually, do what yeast does and expand. Now when I put it in the oven, apparently everything I read says turn on the oven like an hour in advance to preheat it. I don't know why it takes that long, so I don't generally give it quite that long. But I use a pizza stone, but since pizza stone's kind of disgusting, I put one of these silicone baking mats over it, and then I'll toss it in the oven, put the temperature, but we'll talk about that when we get there. And that's it for now. Okay, so at this point, we have preheated the oven to 210. Apparently, if you have a non-fan assisted oven, it should be 230 Celsius. I don't know what that means for you Americans, sorry. I can't do the conversion in my head. So, oven is preheated. We did not make you sit through the entire 30 minutes or so that it's been preheating. I hope you appreciate that. So we have now, as I said before, our silicone baking sheet and our pizza stone, which I meant to preheat, but I forgot. So now we put some flour on the baking sheet. We take our dough, flip it over. Hey, it came out nicely. And zoom in. Look at the pretty little design work on there. Isn't that nice? Now, we're going to score this, which I usually forget to do. Just one cut across the middle of the top. So that should hopefully help it when it's expanding, I think is the point. Now, we take the Dutch oven, which is very heavy, pop that on top, and take the whole thing, and put it in the oven for 35 minutes. 35 minutes. So it'll rise, it'll cook, it'll be tasty, and next thing you will see will be the finished product. Well, we'll see. And then we'll end with finally opening the bread once it's had enough time to cool off a little bit. And that is that. Alright, so the timer has just gone off. Time to take out the bread. So, shoot, I should have set this up. Alright, so I'm going to take out the whole thing, because it's very heavy. Christ. Well, now let's see how it went. Very nicely. Now, technically, at this point, you can test to make sure your bread is ready by lifting it up and tapping the bottom. If it sounds hollow, it is done. I think we can safely say this one's done though, so I'm not going to bother. But there you go. And then in a little bit, when it's cooled down a little bit, we will cut it open and see how it looks inside. Right now though, we just need to shift it onto there. And let's just do this. So we'll let it cool a little bit, and we'll come back and we'll cut it open a little bit. You can see where I scored across the top. I did not score deeply enough, I guess, because clearly it tore there and there instead. I don't know. I'm still learning how this all works. And I guess that's it for now. Okay, so bread has now been cooling for a little bit. We are going to cut it open and see how it looks inside. By the way, I suspect that one of the reasons it's quite so small, as I was saying to Julie earlier, is I think my sourdough might need to be strengthened a little bit, so I pulled it out and we're just going to feed it and discard and whatnot, so that's fine. Now we're going to cut along the score I made earlier, because it turns out that's looking really convenient. Trusty bread knife, wash my hands. I always find that the bottom bit of crust is a bit thicker than the rest and a bit harder to get through. But here we go. Check that out. Doesn't that look wonderful?
It does.
Right? So, let's try and have a little bit, shall we? This is always the hard part because it's very soft when it's fresh. The first cut's easiest because you've got the dome strengthening itself all the way around, but now we don't have that, so it gets a little bit squishier. So, that's pretty tasty. Come on, come bite.
Thank you. Oh, I love it when it's warm.
There's
Delicious.
good stuff. There you go. That is how Colin makes his sourdough.
Well done, honey.